Coming up on this week's episode of Common Denominator.
I don't care if you're 2 years old. I don't care if you're 120 years old. Every single person on the planet wants the exact same thing. Everybody wants greatness.
This is Common Denominator, straight-up conversations with Moshe Popack. Relying on critical thinking and open-spirited debate, we invite you to find common ground on everyday issues and encourage you to be bold, to be optimistic, and to take action. To learn more, head to MoshePopack.com, and we'd be so grateful if you'd like, share, and subscribe to the show. Now, here's your host, Moshe Popack.
Hi, and welcome to Common Denominator. This week, unleashing your creative potential. My guest is Saul Blinkoff, a prolific film director. We'll talk about the Disney films he's helped bring to life, his advice to make you more creative, and why you should strive for awesome instead of great. Hey, Saul, welcome to Common Denominator. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Moshe. So happy to be here and honored to be on your show. Thanks for having me.
So before we get into the meat and potatoes of how animation films are made, I just want to go through a few of your accolades. Being Disney animator for Pocahontas, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Mulan, Tarzan, and a Disney director for Winnie the Pooh, among many other great accomplishments. So let's talk about how actually an animation film gets made.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because my kids grow up in a home where they know the details of how animated films and television shows are made, and they can't even believe it. Just to give you an example, when you're watching an animated anything, if you have a character who's, let's say, a kid wakes up in the morning, goes outside and plays in the snow. Well, just the sound, the audio that has to be mixed and found for that. When the kid opens the door, right, you need that door opening. Each step of the kid's foot. What is he wearing? Is it a boot? What kind of boot is it? And is he walking on cement or wood? And when he steps in the snow, what does that sound like? If it's running, if he's jumping, what is the ambient sound? Are there birds outside? Is there a lawnmower? Is that whatever? So just the sound alone that when you and your kids are watching, take for granted. You don't think about things like that, but just the amount of effort. It takes 4.5 years to make a Disney movie.
Wow.
And it's an insane amount. I mean, I started in hand-drawn animation, movies like Pocahontas, Mulan, and Tarzan. This is before computer animation, which is, of course, Frozen and Toy Story. That's computer animation, which I direct and produce now. But when I started as an animator in hand-drawn animation, it was over 1 million drawings for a movie. So an incredible amount of work.
And is it different? Obviously, they have different superstar actors that star in the different films. How is that process? Do you get to interact with the actors? How is that process?
Well, yeah, exactly. Animation is very similar to what we call live action films, or what you might call a regular film. The difference, of course, is that your animators are actors with pencils. So you have 2 actors for every character. When Tom Cruise stars in a movie, it's just Tom Cruise. But when you have animation, you have the animator that's drawing the character and all the physicality of that acting and emotion. And then you have the voiceover actor, right? So if we're bringing in a big actor, I work with some incredible people. I work with James Woods and Rob Schneider. I work with Mark Hamill. Of course, he played Luke Skywalker. So we bring these actors in and they do the voices, and then their voices are later taken and animated afterwards with the animator. So it's 2 actors for every character.
It seems completely complicated and intense, but super cool. I mean, in my mind, I never, in other words, I would never think that. I always thought that an animated film would be easier than a live film, because you have to find the set and you have to, here you're just kind of working on the computer. But
yeah, Moshe, as I tell my kids, nothing is easy if you want to accomplish something at the highest level. And exactly someone that tells you something is easy, that means they could probably be doing a much better job. There's nothing easy.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I know in each part, and I can relate to that very much. The other day I was, we were talking a little bit before, but the other day we were going over as to step by step of what is it, with the podcast and what we want to do, and similar to your journey, but to kind of bring out the human potential, the human potential, but and that's exactly right. To that point, it isn't easy. If you want to be successful as a husband or wife, it takes work. If you want to be a good father, it takes you being present. It takes work, day in, day out, grit. Same thing in business. In any parts of things, to your point, it is not easy. So I want to bring that out. So
Yeah,
for sure.
totally. Look, when I started in the beginning, look, I didn't know animation was a career. I didn't know that was even, I grew up in New York. My father's a doctor. People I knew were lawyers, business, teachers. I didn't know anyone in the creative field. When I was 11 years old, I saw the movie E.T. and the credits were rolling. I remember tapping my mom and I was like, Mom, that's what I'm going to do someday. She's like, what, you want to leave planet Earth in a spaceship? I'm like, no, Mom, I want to be a director, a filmmaker. I didn't know about those careers. I just knew that I just wanted to be part of making movies. I went to the library and I got books on cameras, lenses, storyboarding. I found out the director of E.T. started making films every weekend with kids in the neighborhood. So I got a film camera, my twin sister, my older brother, and every weekend I would make murder movies, monster movies. I was going to be a director. And then I was in high school and somebody came up to me in 10th grade. They said, what are you going to do when you get out of high school? I said, well, I want to be a filmmaker. They're like, no, you don't. I'm like, yeah, I do. They're like, no, you don't, because if you want to be a filmmaker, you're going to have to move out to Hollywood. And Hollywood is filled with weirdos. They looked at me and said, you don't want to end up a weirdo, do you? And I said, no, I don't. And right then and there, I gave up on my dream of wanting to be a filmmaker because one person told me I would end up a weirdo. And it's so interesting in life that so often many of us allow other people to change the trajectory of our goals and our dreams. And at that point, I gave up on it. My parents said, so what do you want to do? I go, well, I'll go back to being an artist because that's what I always did. I mean, like all kids, I drew
By the
constantly.
way, I don't want to interrupt you, but I got to tell you, I just got goosebumps because I relate to that. I want you to finish your story because I'm gonna tell you, just relate to that. But go ahead.
Yeah. So, my parents got me an art teacher to come to the house because I didn't have a good art program, but I had very supportive parents. And they got this art teacher to come to the house, a private teacher. She set up a bowl of fruit and she taught me to draw with pencil and charcoal and oil painting and watercolor. And I was terrible at drawing hands. It was one of the most difficult things. Any artist listening, you know what I mean? Hands are very difficult. And my art teacher made me draw hands. As a matter of fact, she said to me, you're going to draw a hand from a different position every single night before you go to bed. And in 6 months, you'll get better at drawing hands. And I did. And she taught me one of the greatest lessons I ever learned is that in life, we need to get out of our comfort zone in order to turn our weakness into our strength. We all know what our weaknesses are. Like you said before, whether we want to be a great parent, a great spouse, business, whatever it is we want to be great in life, we need to not only know the goal of what we want to accomplish and how to get there, but we need to be very clear on what our weaknesses are, which we usually are clear on. We just don't like to focus on those because they make us uncomfortable. But if you can approach your weaknesses with the goal of turning those into your strengths, that really is the tool to be able to become great at anything. And she taught me that. And then I went to the movies again and saw another movie that changed my life. I saw the movie, The Little Mermaid. And I remember the credits were rolling and I tapped my mom and I'm like, Mom, that's what I'm going to do someday. She's like, what, you want to fall in love with a fish? I'm like, no, Mom, I want to be an animator. You see, that combined my two passions, my love of drawing and my love of filmmaking, put them together, animation. And plus, I found out that Disney had a studio in Orlando, Florida. I don't have to go out to Hollywood. So there I was, a junior in high school, and I knew what my dream was. I was clear for the first time in my life. My dream was to become a Disney animator. That's really how it all started.
I'll tell you something, a few things going back to the point that gave me goosebumps because growing up, I went along, I didn't really have an opinion, and we were 5 brothers growing up, and people around me would tell me I didn't have the personality to go into business. And I started to believe that. But at the same time, I said to myself, you know what? This is what I want to do, meaning I want to provide for my wife, for my kids, for my family. And I want to do things. I want to have that freedom to be able to give back to society. And this is the whole point of the podcast. If people don't realize is that I promised myself that if I would survive, that I would succeed, that in, at least using my voice and trying the best that I can, person by person, to try to make a difference. So, I was just telling my son, to your point, the fact, I got to give you kudos, because the fact that as a junior, because my son's a sophomore in high school, and the only thing that I talked to him, I just drove him to school this morning, and I said, find the thing that you love to do. That is, and start. Let that be. In other words, whatever it is, he's like, I love cooking. I'm like, you know what? Let's begin. Let's open a food truck and just let's try to make it happen. Because like, I don't know if I want to go to college. I said, listen, I'll be okay with you not going to college if you're a self-learner, lifelong self-learner, and you know what you love. I want you to tell me what you love. That's what.
Yeah, that's so perfect. And I tell this to students a lot, so similarly to what you were saying to your son. I say, look, even if you're not ready to commit to a career, and make that decision, I want to be all in on just this path. Let's first take a step back and find out what interests you. What do you enjoy a little bit? Not passionate about 100%. I want to do this for the rest of my life. I want to play basketball. I want to play an instrument. I'm obsessed with being a doctor. I'm not talking about that kind of clarity. Let's say you're a person that has interest in many different things.
Right.
A little bit of interest. The example I give, it's like dating. If you're dating and you see this girl and she's cute, she's attractive, you're not going to say you want to marry her yet. You're not going to commit yet. All that physical attraction is a motivation to go inquire a little bit more. And then you go out on a date. And after that first date, you probably don't know you're ready to spend the rest of your life with someone. That's why dating takes a little bit of time. It's the same thing with, I'm a movie guy, right? You look at a movie poster. Sometimes you look at that movie poster. You don't know if the movie's good. So you watch the trailer, and you watch the trailer. You're still not sure you want to commit to the movie. So you read the reviews. It's the same thing with picking a career, a life goal. First, we pick the little passions that we have a little bit. I'm a little bit interested in sports. Now go date it. What does that mean? It means go find out more about that career. I like animals. Go find out what careers there are for someone that loves animals. You could work in a zoo. You could be a vet. You could be someone that does, breeding. And what you do is you find other people that are successful in those careers, and you start asking them questions. What is a day like for you? Right. What is it that my brother loves sports. I mean, he breathes sports like the way I breathe movies, I guess. I mean, he's been a sports guy since he was 5 years old. Pittsburgh Steelers, growing up in Philly, he loved Terry Bradshaw and all those old players, and he knew everything about every player. And there was a point in his life, he was at University of Michigan, and he tried to get onto the University of Michigan football team. He wasn't good enough. And he's like, well, I still want to be involved in sports. So he found out about becoming a sports agent. He investigated that. He didn't wake up with a dream. Oh my gosh, my dream is to be a sports agent. He's like, no, I like sports. I'm not going to be athletic enough to play professionally, but I still want to be in that world. What are the other jobs out there that are available to me? And let me go investigate them.
Yeah.
And he did. He found out different jobs. As a matter of fact, eventually he called up Pat Croce. I don't know if you know that name. He wrote a letter to Pat Croce, who used to own the Philadelphia 76ers. And he said, Pat, I'm inspired by your story. I want to work for you. Pat eventually hired my brother. He became part of his sales team, and my brother became a sports agent and then ultimately formed his own business. But that's the point. Make sure when you find whatever your passions are, you just date different careers and see where the next date takes you.
By the way, completely brilliant. I give that advice like people in college. I said, listen, live in your parents' home. It's fine. Okay? Exactly to your point. Go find the person that's doing what you love. You just tell them, I will be here. I'll bring you espresso, get you a newspaper. I'll do whatever, shine your shoes. I don't care. But all I want to do, I'm not going to open my mouth. I just want to be around you and serve you because you're doing, and you're making money doing what I love. And that's it. And by the way, you do that for a year, you'll see tremendous compounding results.
Yeah.
Most people don't take me up on that advice, unfortunately, but it's the best investment, best education that you can get just being a sponge on the wall, just like that, right?
It's so good. And, you know, your kids and students that you have are lucky to get you because there's a lot of people out there that don't have mentors, that don't have people that nurture them. Look, I told you when I was a junior in high school, my dream was to become a Disney animator. I just didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to become a Disney animator. I was passionate. I wanted to do it, but I had no goal. I had no way of figuring it out. There was no internet then. Today, you want to be a Disney animator. You type in Google, how do you become a Disney animator? You'll get the answer. So I didn't have that. But what I did have was incredibly supportive parents. And my mom took me, not my older brother, not my twin sister, took me to Disney World. And she's walking me around Disney World just to find out how her son could become an animator. She's asking all the Disney employees. Wow. They're called cast members.
Right.
We were getting on the It's a Small World boat ride. We're stepping on the boat. And the woman at Disney's like, how many in your party? I'm stepping on we're like 2. My mom's like, by the way, my son wants to be at Disney. Can you help him? The lady's like, ma'am, this is a boat ride. You know, we don't hire animators here. Finally, the lady says to my mom, look, if you want your son to work at Disney, he's got to go to the Disney casting building. It was 4 minutes away from where we were in Disney World. So my mom takes me to this building. It's this incredible office. I mean, can you imagine what a Disney office building looks like? It was whimsical, imaginative. The doorknobs were the ones from Alice in Wonderland. They were made out of brass, that the ones from Alice in Wonderland that talk. I open up the doors. I stand in this atrium. There's gold statuettes of Mickey, Donald, Pluto, Goofy. Even the air was like sweet, like Disney, like pixie dust in the air. It was amazing. I walk up this ramp. I'm sitting there finally for this interview. By the way, walking up the ramp, there was a painting of Peter Pan and Wendy flying off to Neverland. And I still remember looking at that painting thinking, wow, that's where I want to go. I want to go off to Neverland. I want to work at Disney. I mean, is that even real? I'm sitting there for the interview, and the woman says to me, what are you doing here? I'm like, well, my dream is to become a Disney animator. She says, well, we don't hire those here. I'm like, well, who do you hire? She says, well, we hire people who work in the parks, people that make the Dumbo ride go up and down, or people that turn the teacups around and sell drinks and merchandise. I'm like, nah, that's not my dream. She goes, well, hold on a second. And she walks out of the room, comes back in 2 minutes later, and hands me a piece of paper. That piece of paper was the most valuable piece of paper I ever held in my hands. You see, that piece of paper was a list of 8 schools, 8 art schools that Disney recruits their artists from. She says, if you want to be a Disney animator, you need to go to one of these schools. Boom, that was it. That was the recipe. You know, if you go to a great restaurant, you taste an unbelievable dessert, you can make that dessert at home if you have the recipe. That's what that was. And in my head, the equation was complete. Saul plus go to one of these schools will equal dream of becoming a Disney animator.
So what was your next actual practical step that you took?
So my mom took me on a trip to each of these schools to see which would be a good fit. I get to one school in Columbus, Ohio. It's the Columbus College of Art and Design. And when I'm walking the halls of the school, I remember seeing the artwork on the walls. And I'm telling you, Moshe, the artwork was 100 times better than anything that I could ever do. And if I chose a school like that, I would have been the worst artist at the school. But I have a theory. I don't care if you're 2 years old. I don't care if you're 120 years old. Every single person on the planet wants the exact same thing. Everybody wants greatness. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be average. Nobody wakes up and says, I want to be mediocre. And the way to become great is we need to surround ourselves with people that are better than us, people that can uplift us.
Yes.
And a person needs to be somewhat humble to realize where their limitations are and to put themselves in environments where people are better than them and not feel bad about yourself, but be motivated to grow. And I chose this school, and thank God they chose me. Yeah. I'm in the school. The first week in the school, we find out that a Disney representative is coming to our school. The guy from the Walt Disney Studios who hires the animators is going to be in our school in a week. He comes to our school. We're standing he's in this auditorium with us. All the students were there that day. The freshmen, the sophomore, the juniors, the seniors.
Completely loving the storytelling, students. By the way. I'm just fascinating.
I mean, even telling it to you, it brings me back to the emotions of that moment. And I'm in this auditorium, and the Disney guy's on stage, and he says, before I begin, let me just ask you, how many of you want to be Disney animators? Every hand went up. He said, well, just so you know, out of the 750 of you, maybe, just maybe 4 of you will ever work there. That's how competitive it is. And when he said that, I remember thinking one thing. I wonder who the other 3 are going to be.
Wow.
Because in life, you either believe in yourself that you can accomplish or you don't. And I don't mean what you tell people on Instagram and Facebook or what you tell all your friends. I don't mean what you tell anybody. I mean, deep down, do we really believe that we can accomplish? Do we really believe that we can taste greatness? And at that point in my life, I believed in myself. And he says, if you want to work at Disney, you got to get the Disney internship. No internship, no Disney. And if you want the internship, here's what you need. And I'm like on the edge of my seat listening. He says, you need a portfolio, 25 pages filled with hundreds of drawings of figure drawing and anatomy, all drawings from life, no cartoon characters, no Mickey Mouse. We want to see you draw people and animals from life. Well, the equation was now growing. First, it was Saul, go to one of these schools equal Disney. Now it's Saul plus you're going to need a portfolio of figure drawing and anatomy of animals and people to get into Disney. And that's when I got that clarity. And let me tell you, Moshe, that first week in school, I met this guy, Andy. And he was by far one of the best artists in the school, even as a freshman. He became my best friend. And let me tell you, just becoming friends with someone like this made me a better artist, because who we choose to be friends with actually affects who we become.
Big believer in that. And I'll tell you,
right?
First of all, I want to just tell you also the creativity still and I'm not going to, as an adult that I want to hone on that for parents and kids. First of all, kudos to your mom as well for being supportive. I want to let every parent know that they should not kill the creative abilities of our children, because that is what the future holds. The ability for our children to have the that creative spark that's not killed, and the belief, like you said, and because if you're going to believe someone that's negative, we are programmed. As someone once told me, thousands and thousands and thousands of times we hear the word no up to the age of 18 compared to the word yes. So our default programming, is okay, no, or we can't. So if you're around positive people doing positive things, that's what makes a difference. So, here it is. You're able to find, you're the perfect example, right? Like, what are the odds? 4 in 750. I mean, that's right. Less than 1%.
Check this out. So sophomore year, I get those drawings together. I put them in a portfolio and I sent them into Disney. And a couple weeks later, I get a letter on Disney stationery. It had a gold leaf Mickey imprinted. My name was typed on the envelope. I still remember getting a letter from the Disney company. It made me understand that they knew I was alive. That was the coolest feeling. I open up that letter. It says, Saul, thanks for sending your portfolio in, but you got rejected. You didn't make it. Look, I wasn't discouraged. I didn't expect to get in the first time. Like I said, I was happy they knew I was alive. I put that letter up over my desk. It motivated me another year. Next year, Andy and I are both drawing all the time. We were inseparable. We go play basketball. When we weren't playing basketball, we would draw the basketball players. We drew constantly. One day we had to go to the Columbus Zoo to draw animals. And it was one of the coldest days in Ohio. And anyone listening, you know what it's like if you live somewhere cold. I'm talking bitter cold, freezing. And we go to the zoo. There's about 15 students on the bus. We get to the zoo and we all go right into the cafe at the zoo first to just warm up because it was freezing out there. We get hot drinks and stuff. And then after a couple minutes, me and Andy left there and we're walking around the zoo to see what animal appealed to us that we were going to draw. And the first animal we got to was incredible. We saw this giant elephant, and this elephant was just walking back and forth, repeating the exact same motion. And someone that's studying movement and animation, that's like the greatest gift you could get. Picture like you ask a person to hold a pose for you. Can you hold that pose? I want to draw you. But you're studying animation and movement. So you want someone to repeat the same action. And to get an elephant to do that, it's like miraculous. That's all that elephant did. It was just walk back and forth. So Andy and I stayed there for an hour, drawing one elephant, walking back and forth. Every pose, the way the trunk flowed, all the anatomy, it was incredible. Afterwards, we get onto the bus, and Andy and I are showing each other our drawings. Oh, you did this, and I did that. Awesome. And then I see some other guys on the bus, all the other students. I'm like, guys, we never saw you at the elephants. What animals were you drawing? And this one guy says to me, well, none of us ever left the cafe.
Wow.
I'm like, what do you mean you didn't leave the cafe? He goes, well, we couldn't. I said, why not? What happened? He says, it was too cold.
Yeah.
I said, what? He goes, well, it was too cold. It was at that moment that I knew that someday I would get into Disney. Because while I was surrounded by students that all were big dreamers and wore Disney sweatshirts and hats and had Mickey Mouse posters on their walls, when push comes to shove, how bad do you really want it? And for anyone listening, if you watch a documentary on Netflix or something about some person that you look up to and admire, you know the quality that they all have in common? They persevere through pain. That's right. And when you have expectations that there's going to be struggle and expectations that there's going to be pain, that will motivate you to persevere, to go through it, to grow through it. And I got my portfolio together, and Andy and I got our best drawing, and we sent him into Disney. And a month and a half goes by. It was midway through junior year, and I get a call, and it's Andy. I'm like, hey, man, what's up? He's like, Blinkoff, you're not going to believe this. I'm like, what am I not going to believe? He goes, I got it. Wow. I said, you got what? He goes, I just got a call from Disney. I got the internship. I'm like, that's amazing. Congratulations. I couldn't believe I knew somebody that got it. He said, but you didn't hear yet? I'm like, no, but they could be trying to call me right now. I got to hang up. I hang up the phone. I'm pacing in my dining room back and forth. Mom comes in at that moment. She's like, honey, what happened? I'm like, Mom, Andy just got the call from Disney. Me and my parents are pacing back and forth, and the phone's not ringing. And I'm freaking out. So you know what I did? I picked up the phone and I called the head of Disney myself. Who does that? Well, I did.
Right.
Because when there's something you want in your life, you will do anything to get it. Look, Moshe, I grew up in New York, and growing up in the 90s, you and I probably had the same hero, Michael Jordan. Were you a Bulls fan? Were you a Jordan fan?
New York, right? Brooklyn, Queens, same. Michael Jordan, right? The ultimate Chicago Bulls, New York Knicks, right?
Right. So those games, first of all, I love the Knicks. Those are my boys, Rick Pitino years. But when Jordan would come to town, he would destroy them. But just to watch Jordan do what he did was mesmerizing. Yeah. I mean, and before one game, it's a true story. I'm standing next to the court before the game, and Jordan's in those breakaway sweatpants with the buttons on his pants. And he's warming up, and he had that game face, that focus I will never forget. And I must have been about 13 at the time. And my older brother's standing next to me, and I'm like, Jay, I'm going to walk out there and go meet Michael Jordan right now. This is at Madison Square Garden, standing next to the court. My brother's like, you're not going anywhere. Before he could finish that sentence, I step out on the court, and I'm looking up to Michael Jordan. And I said, "Hi, Mr. Jordan." And he looks down at me and says, quote, "Yo, how you doing?" End quote. And he shook my hand. This one right here,
Yeah.
which I've never washed, by the way, still has the sweat from number 23. But the reason I walked out there is because in life, we got to get out of our comfort zone. And if there's something you really want, you will do anything to get it. How often do I get a call from somebody? My dream is to do a voice in a Disney movie. I'm like, oh, yeah, it's your dream, huh? Okay, what have you done to do that? And they're like, well, I don't know how. I'm like, why don't you just go to Google? Type in, how do you do a voice? You'll find out the answer. So often I meet big dreamers, but I don't meet big doers.
They did a psychologist #1 TED Talk. Someone asked me, what's my #1 TED Talk, to your point. And the psychologist said, grit. Grit, to your point, whatever it takes. You write it down. I ask people, different people come, invest in here, do this. And I ask the same question. I said, first of all, step 1, show me the action plan, bullet points. What's the clarity you have in your mind? Show me what it is, and show me, do you have the time and the grit to bring that idea that you have on the back of that paper into reality? That's it. What are you going to do? Are you going to do 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday night? Are you going to miss the Super Bowl, right? And show up, whatever,
right.
knocking on doors?
How serious are you, right?
That's it. Right.
Yeah. So I called the head of Disney, and I get the guy on the phone. I go, "Hi, my name is Saul Blinkoff. I want to find out if I got the internship." He goes, "Saul, I have your name on a list here." I'm like, "Really?" And he goes, "Yeah, you didn't make it." I said, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, you didn't make it." I said, "Well, what about Andy?" He goes, "Yeah, he made it. You didn't." I was like, "Okay." I hang up the phone. And that was a bittersweet moment in my life. Sweet, I was happy for my best friend. Bitter, my dream was shattered. Andy's going to Disney World. They call Disney World the happiest place on earth, right? He's going to the happiest place, a sunny, beautiful. I'm going back to Ohio in the wintertime, what I thought was the most depressing place on earth. And when I got back to school, I'm walking the halls and everyone's coming up to me and they're like, "Blinkoff, what are you doing here? Oh, you didn't make it. Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, where's Andy? Oh, he got in. You didn't. Oh, that's cool." I became known as the guy that was friends with the guy that got into Disney. And I became known as a guy who didn't get what he really, really wanted and dreamed of. And I started to feel like a loser. And then I came up with the most brilliant way to take that feeling away. And for anyone listening right now, you can forget everything that I've said up until right now. Remember what I say right now, and it will change your life. If there's ever a moment in your life and you feel like a loser for not accomplishing a goal, you do what I did, and that feeling goes away in a blink of an eye. You know what I did? I gave up. I gave up on the entire dream. Instead of becoming a person that really wants something, I took away the want. But let me tell you, make no mistake, when you give up on your dream, you're giving up on yourself. And I had given up on my entire dream because reality set in. You know what reality was? Andy was an awesome artist, and I was just average. And let me tell you, every single person in the world, including Jeff Bezos, every single person in the world has a shoulder angel and a shoulder devil. That shoulder angel telling us that we can aspire and dream and change the world. And that shoulder devil that tells us, who do you think you are to go for that? I heard an interview from Oprah once. She says, "Look, I've interviewed more people than almost anybody alive. I've interviewed everybody famous, every president. I've interviewed Tom Cruise, Obama, you name it. I've interviewed them all." And she says, "And when the camera's off, right after the interview, every single person I interviewed turns to me and asks me the same question. Was that okay? Right. Did you get what you want? Was I all right?" Everybody doubts themselves. But we step through that doubt and we try anyway. But at that point, I had given up.
So, Saul, clearly you didn't give up on your dream, right? Failure, failure, failure. So how actually did you become a Disney animator?
Actually, let me take you back to school for one moment. Once I gave up on my dream, a week later, a buddy calls me up and says, "Saul, I got tickets to go see a movie. You want to go?" I'm like, "I'm not in the mood." He goes, "But they're free." I'm like, "Okay, I'll go." Someone offers you free in college, you take it. So I go to the movies, Moshe, and at the end of this movie, tears are streaming down my face. I watched a movie that was a true story about a guy that was 5 feet tall. He doesn't have an ounce of athletic ability, and he wants to play football at Notre Dame. What movie is it?
Rudy.
There you go. You've seen Rudy, right?
Yep.
Incredible movie. Those people listening, if you haven't seen the movie, go hit pause right now and go see that movie. And it's a true story about a guy who's 5 feet tall. He's not even athletic. If you were friends with Rudy Rudiger, if you were his best friend and he told you his dream was to play football at Notre Dame, you know what you would have told him as his friend? Dude, I love you. Get a new dream. And Rudy was like, oh, yeah? Well, we'll just see about that. And he tries to get in, rejected. Tries a second time, rejected. Third time, rejected. But fourth time, if you look at the movie poster for the movie Rudy, it says, when people tell you dreams don't come true, tell them about Rudy. He gets in. And tears are streaming down my face because I was thinking one thing. If an unathletic guy could get into Notre Dame with an insane amount of hard work and heart, then what I thought was an untalented artist like me could get into Disney with an insane amount of hard work and heart. And I decided to never give up again. I called up the head of Disney the next day and I asked him, let me ask you, how close was I to getting in? He said, what do you mean? I'm like, well, how many people did you pick? He said, Saul, we picked 17 from over 3,800 portfolios around the world. You made it to number 20. What? I had missed it by 3. Do you know how many times in life we could be so close to achieving our goal? And we feel like we're miles away and all we needed to do was push a little more. And then I asked him the $1 million question. Why didn't I get in? He said, Saul, you're the first person to ever ask me that. Because in life, we will fail. That's what it means to be human. And when we fail, we find out why. That's the answer key to growing. He said, you need more dynamic poses. You need more dynamic viewpoints. Stand on a stool and look down at a model or look up. Give us a dynamic perspective. I was like, thank you, answer key. I worked on those drawings. I put a whole new portfolio together. I send it into Disney and boom. When you wish upon us, I got in. It's the circle of life. I got in. And I started my dream at the happiest place on earth, working on Pocahontas, Hunchback, Mulan, Tarzan. Eventually became a director and had this incredible journey through Hollywood.
I think that's brilliant. I want to let the audience know how to find out more about you. Tune into your podcast.
Yeah, the podcast is Life of Awesome. You can check it out. I interviewed George Foreman. His story is amazing. Alan Menken, incredible people. I have Simone Biles coming up soon, which is going to be a great interview. I'm very excited. And you can check out my website, saulblinkoff.com. You can sign up there and check it out. I'm also on Instagram. I post videos and clips and my family and quotes and all kinds of things that I hope will inspire and motivate people to live their most awesome life.
Thank you so much, Saul. It's really love your story, love your energy, and really, really appreciate it. We just have to step by step, person by person, we try to transfer the energy by being a good role model. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks so much for having me, Moshe. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Saul.
Thanks for listening to the Common Denominator podcast. Join us next week for another inspiring, impactful, and empowering conversation. To learn more about Moshe, head to MoshePopack.com. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it. And we'd be grateful if you could rate, review, and subscribe to the show.